Soon after Old School RuneScape launched, Jagex introduced the Cursed Goblin Bow during one of the strangest, most forgotten events in RuneScape history. Nobody knew it yet, but this weapon would cause widespread cheating, rampant griefing, and a whole host of other problems. But a small group of legitimate players needed this weapon to progress the game. Why was this bow such a problem? And why was it even added to the game in the first place? This is the story of RuneScape's Cursed Goblin Bow. Now, before I get to what made this weapon so divisive, I need to discuss the weird event that caused its creation. Our story begins in early 2013, just 77 days after Old School RuneScape opened. At this point in time, the player count was extremely small and shrinking every day. The initial hype had worn off, and with no proper development tools available to the team, updates were infrequent and tiny. Jagex knew they needed something to keep the players engaged, and had been dreaming up an event that they could make with their limited resources. So on May 10th, 2013, players who visited the city of Varrock were in for a big surprise. Every so often, a group of level 4 goblin raiders would spawn at one of the city's entrances and battle with the nearby guards. The guards would shout things like, "For Varrock" and "Save the city," while the goblins would shout, "Humans ugly" and "Goblin time." Every time I read that last one, I can't help but laugh because it makes me think of Morbius shouting, "It's Morbin time" in that one movie that nobody watched. Once all the goblins were dead, it was like nothing ever happened. If you walked by even a minute too late, you'd have no idea about the massive battle that just occurred. Players who were lucky enough to take part in one of these battles were left very confused. Jagex made no announcement that these battles were going to happen, so many players assumed that it was some sort of strange glitch or an old feature that had been accidentally turned back on. In actuality, it was a teaser for Old School RuneScape's first ever custom event, the 2013 Goblin Invasion. But players didn't know that yet, and wouldn't know it for a while. The attacks on Varrock only lasted a few days before they abruptly stopped, leaving many players feeling like they had just taken part in a collective fever dream. There was no explanation, no follow-up, and now, no goblins. For those who weren't there, it might have seemed like something too weird to actually be real, if not for the videos and screenshots that proved it actually happened. But then, in July, the community finally got some clarification in a blog post. The attacks on Varrock were just scouting events undertaken by the goblins. They had been gathering strength the last few months and would soon return. It would be up to the community to fend them off once again very soon. The blog also got an accompanying poll asking players where the next invasion should take place, and ultimately, Falador won. On August 2nd, the attacks would begin again, this time in Falador. Every hour, a new attack would start, this time with level 30 Goblin Raiders and level 50 Goblin Lieutenants. Warrior women, Paladins, Varrock Guards, and Knights of Ardone would also spawn to help fight off the Goblins. Funnily enough, I don't think any extra Falador Guards would spawn to help. I don't really know what they were doing. The following week, the raids would move to Lumbridge Castle, this time with even stronger Goblins. But not much else really changed besides that. The next week is when things got interesting. Starting on August 23rd, if you talked to this scout in the Varrock Castle courtyard, he would transport you to a cavern full of goblins. You could also enter by using this red portal, but I think a lot of us have really bad memories with another red portal this game has. Now, Jagex still didn't have the tools to make new maps, so this cavern was really just a copy of the Scavid Caves from Gutanoth. But that's not the most interesting part of this place. The goblins here had a chance to drop some brand new weapons when killed: the Cursed Goblin Bow, Staff, and Warhammer. These weapons would hit really strong against goblins, but otherwise had pretty unremarkable stats. However, the bow contained a dark secret that would take players a while to discover. But first, let's talk about Crystal of Atlan, a brand new Magic Punk MMO action RPG where you'll dive into the Thornbird Adventurers Guild and unravel the mysteries of the Crystal of Atlan. With fluid combat, seamless combos, and a unique focus on utilizing the Z-axis, Crystal of Atlan delivers a multi-platform adventure that feels both intuitive and satisfying. There's multiple classes to choose from that are all unlocked at the start. challenging team battles, and a uniquely beautiful Magic Punk world to explore. Pre-registration is now open, where you can unlock early access and exclusive rewards, like in the Magitech Summon event, where you can collect summon tickets for a chance to win amazing prizes, like the iPhone 16 Pro Max 1TB, Apple Watch Ultra 2, PS5 Pro, and more. Or during the Milestone event, if you reach the target of 8 million milestones, you'll unlock the Legend Returns outfit, among other in-game rewards. Thank you to Crystal of Atlan for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to pre-register using my link in the description below. The following week was the second to last phase of the event. A crack was added to the wall of the Goblin Cavern. Entering it would place you inside the Goblin Temple, Old School RuneScape's first ever custom map, full of high-level goblins and white knights to help you fight the goblins. Funnily enough, this area temporarily became the new best range training method in the game. By hurling Chinchampas into the crowd of goblins, you could earn close to 300,000 ranged XP per hour, and because of their valuable drops, you wouldn't lose as much money as chinning in other locations. After killing enough goblins, the Goblin High Priest would appear. He could only be damaged with Cursed Goblin weapons, and upon being killed would drop the Disc of Returning. There was actually no real reason for the disc to be included in this event. It was a rare item from the original version of RuneScape, and this was just one of the ways Jagex wanted to make it available again for old school players. All it does is teleport you to and from the Black Hole, the place that Jagex used to send rule-breaking players before they developed a proper punishment system. The final stage of the event occurred near the Barbarian Village. Much like every other goblin raid, it was full of high-level goblins. Every half hour, a massive level 100 goblin named King Snagwort would appear, who, when killed, would drop another rare item from the original version of RuneScape, a half-full jug of wine. Yes, a half-drank jug of wine was once a very valuable and desired item on this game. The event would end on September 5th, 2013, and every boss and location related to it was removed from the game. However, the Cursed Goblin weapons were not. Instead of receiving them from goblins, players could now buy them from Diango in Draenor Village for a few coins each. But why would you even want these weapons, unless you were some sort of goblin slayer? Their bonuses are pretty terrible. Well, players soon discovered that both the Cursed Goblin staff and bow could be used for splashing in ways that players hadn't seen before. Splashing is the process of only hitting zeros on every monster you attack on purpose. But why would anyone want to do that? Well, with magic, there's a number of reasons. The main one is that it's extremely AFK magic XP. Even though you're hitting nothing but zeros, you still gain magic XP, and the monster never dies. This was at a time when you could be in combat for 6 hours without getting logged out, so many players would splash overnight to gain lots of magic XP. Now, magic splashing already existed at the time, but this staff made it much more accessible. In order to consistently splash with magic, you need to have a -64 magic attack bonus. Unlike every other staff, the Cursed Goblin staff provided an extremely small positive magic attack bonus, making splashing much more accessible at a lower level. The only other easy way to get to a -64 magic attack bonus at the time while using a regular staff was by wearing green D-hide vambraces, which require 40 ranged. Now, the bow was a bit more unique. It was coded to always splash on anything that wasn't a goblin. No negative bonuses required, and unlike splashing with magic, which requires expensive runes to cast spells, ranged splashing was free, as the bow didn't require arrows. But if splashing in magic gives you a little magic XP, you'd think that splashing with ranged gives you a little ranged XP. Well, no. When you hit a zero with ranged, you don't gain any XP. So how is this beneficial to anyone? It was perfect for level 3 accounts who wanted to train Slayer. RuneScape has a community of players who purposely never train any of their combat skills, so that their combat level remains at 3. There's no real benefit to doing this aside from showing off and playing in a unique way. It's the same reason people make area or chunk blocked accounts. Anyway, your Slayer level does not influence your combat level. You could be level 99 Slayer and still have level 3 combat, but how exactly are you supposed to train Slayer without fighting anything? The trick was using the Cursed Goblin Bow and a Ring of Recoil. The ring lets you damage monsters without attacking them yourself. When you're wearing a Ring of Recoil and a monster damages you, it reflects some of the damage back onto the monster. But just wearing the ring didn't give you Slayer XP when the monster died. That's where the Cursed Goblin Bow came in. If you attacked the monster with your bow at least once, you would earn Slayer XP when the monster died, even if your ring did all of the damage. However, because you didn't deal any damage yourself, you only got 50% of the Slayer XP per kill. My explanation is a bit of an oversimplification, but the point is, level 3s could do this to train Slayer without leveling up their combat skills. Now this was a very slow method. At the most, you'd be gaining a few thousand XP per hour. Players would much later discover they could use alternate accounts to deal damage to monsters instead of recoils and increase their XP rates dramatically, but I won't break down the specifics on that one. The other big use players found for this bow was actually breaking bots. At the time, one of the most popular bot scripts that free-to-play bots were using was a seagull killing script. The bots would run over to Port Sarim and kill seagulls for some quick combat XP. The scriptwriters chose seagulls because there's a lot of them, there was little competition from real players, and they'd be less likely to get reported compared to somewhere more popular like chickens. So some clever players would sign up for free-to-play accounts, buy Cursed Goblin Bows, and then just sit at Port Sarim and splash on the seagulls all day. The bots wouldn't have anything to attack, so they'd just sit there doing nothing. All of its really cool uses aside, the most popular uses for this bow weren't innocent. Anyone who has ever trained their combat skills in RuneScape has been crashed before. You're just minding your own business, fighting rock crabs, and some a-hole comes over to try and steal your spot. At this point, you either say, oh well, and hop worlds and try to find a free spot, or stand your ground and try to compete with this guy for kills. Well, the Cursed Goblin Bow made it impossible to compete. Think of it as like the evil version of what players did to those seagull bots. In single-way combat zones, they would lock the crab into combat so you couldn't fight it at all. If they were a super loser, they'd even do it on multiple accounts. They could steal every crab in your spot and lock them into combat until you gave up. They could have just hopped worlds like a normal person, but apparently it's far easier to open 3 more RuneScape tabs, pay for extra membership, and bully someone else into hopping. But getting crashed by mean players was far from the largest problem this bow created. At the time, all free-to-play accounts had to have 24 hours of playtime before they could sell most of the items on the Grand Exchange. Instead of actually playing the game for 24 hours, you could run over to Diango, buy a Cursed Goblin Bow for basically nothing, and just splash your way to 24 hours for virtually no time or GP investment. However, the majority of people using this method weren't cute noobs trying to unlock the Grand Exchange. It was massive bot farm owners. Sure, they could just bot for 24 hours, but they'd be risking an early ban during a time when their account is being watched much more closely, and their once trusty Seagull script was no longer an option. This bow would cause hundreds of bots to flow into the game every single day. Because the game had such limited bot detection at the time, missing the opportunity to stop these accounts early made the problem much harder to control. Now, like a lot of things in RuneScape, Jagex didn't make any immediate changes to the bow. They had to sit with it for a while before they could decide what to do with it. In the meantime, Jagex would launch a sequel to 2013 2013's Goblin Invasion event in September of 2014. However, compared to the first one, it was a bit underwhelming, so I'll keep this brief. You would enlist with either the Falador Guards or the Goblins, and fight for your side. As part of this event, you could purchase a brand new weapon, the Event RPG, or Goblin Paint Cannon as it's called today. Using it, you would paint NPCs on the opposing team. You could paint enemies by left-clicking them while it was equipped, or by right-clicking them and selecting the option to, and I'm not kidding, 360 no-scope them. After they were painted, you could kill them for drops and increase your team's score, like some weird version of Splatoon. As part of the final phase of the event, another very large goblin would appear who players could 360 no-scope to death to receive exciting items like these. The goblin's name, in case you were wondering, was General Danknuck. It probably comes as no surprise that after this MLG montage fever dream of an event, there were no more future Goblin Invasion events. And Cursed Goblin weapons served no purpose during this event. It was like Jagex had completely forgotten about them. This event would come and go, and they still hadn't addressed the crashing and botting issues that the Cursed Goblin Bow was causing. But roughly 2 years after they had been introduced to the game, Jagex finally decided to do something. On March 6th, 2015, they nerfed all 3 Goblin weapons. For now. Yeah, the story gets even weirder as you'll see in a moment. But for now, Jagex removed the bow's ability to consistently hit zeros, and made it require arrows to function. They also set its combat bonuses to 0, along with the Goblin Warhammer and Staff. This nerf didn't change much of anything for the Warhammer and Staff, since their bonuses were already so small to begin with. In a way, it was a bit of a buff to the Staff, since most people using it didn't actually want its small positive magic attack bonus at all. This update made the general player base happy, but greatly upset the level 3 community. Jagex had removed their best Slayer training method without warning. The next best alternative was cleaning museum finds in hope of finding an experience lamp that they could use on Slayer, a process that would reward less than 2,000 XP per hour on average. Throughout the years, the level 3 community would discover more methods to get better Slayer XP rates, but they were either not as good as the Cursed Goblin Bow, or would later be removed from the game. Now, despite all of the problems they originally caused, Jagex in 2023 would partially undo the nerf they made to Cursed Goblin weapons, but not to the bow. The Cursed Goblin Warhammer would be given a negative 100 crush bonus, making it a consistent way to once again hit only zeros, but this time with melee. But you might be wondering, why? Well, over the last few years, Jagex had accidentally introduced splash melee weapons a number of times. Just like ranged splash weapons, you wouldn't get any combat XP while using them. Skillers would discover them, train with them for a week or two, and then Jagex would patch them out of the game. Jagex never quite elaborated on why they kept patching them out, but we can only assume it's because of all the problems the Cursed Goblin Bow originally caused. When they patched the most recent one, Skillers finally directly asked Jagex, "Hey, can you just leave melee splash weapons in the game? We think that these days they wouldn't cause much of a problem." And they were right. Much of the problems that the Cursed Goblin Bow caused in 2013 would no longer be an issue in 2023. Remember how new free-to-play accounts would need to play for 24 hours to access most of the Grand Exchange? Jagex had since changed that to a combination of 20 hours of playtime, 10 quest points, and a total level of 100. You would now also get logged out after 20 minutes of inactivity instead of 6 hours. This also applies even if you're in combat. So bot farms could no longer AFK their way to Grand Exchange access using these weapons. By now, monster griefing had also become much less of a problem. Not only were there hundreds more servers available for players to play on, there was now a wide variety of monsters suitable for training on. It seems to me that Jagex just kept patching splash weapons out of the game because that's what they'd always done, without really stopping to examine why. die. So they decided to throw the level 3 community a bone and make them widely available again, thus making Training Slayer on a level 3 viable without ruining the rest of the game this time. And that is the silly history of the Cursed Goblin Bow. Check out the video on the right, all about another controversial bow. A few years back, Jagex accidentally gave out the Twisted Bow for free, and Jagex attempts to fix it were a disaster.